Deputy Commissioner is the latest to reject the notion amidst mounting calls for defunding and or dismantling police forces across the country. But is this a misunderstanding of the word systemic, as some anti-racism advocates are suggesting? To dig into what it means to hear that kind of thing from such a senior RCMP member, the press gallery is here. Again, CTV parliamentary reporter Kevin Gallagher is here. The executive editor of Chatelaine, Denise Bulkasoon, is back. And joining us for this round is Vicky Mochama, the writer and critical race, culture, and society editor at The Conversation. All of you welcome, and Vicky, welcome to this section of the program. Your reaction when you hear, Vicky, someone like a senior member of the RCMP denying their systemic racism?
To me, it's unsurprising because there have been countless inquiries and commissions and reports which specifically cite the RCMP and other major police forces' roles in perpetuating systemic racism. And we've yet to really hear how those institutions have internalized those criticisms. So, for example, when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry specifically and directly names and cites all those previous reports about how police participate and exacerbate anti-Indigenous racism, those institutions are not often the first to accept those criticisms. And so it's not surprising to me that senior personnel inside the RCMP feel this way and are even unclear on the definition of a systemic racism.
And they keep changing the terms, Denise. That I've heard now, oh, it's racism, but it's not systemic racism. Oh, it's not systemic racism. Now we hear it's just unconscious bias. These terms actually matter. What do you make of all this?
Well, the police are an institution, and so therefore it would be systemic racism, not unconscious. I mean, systemic racism is what is the infection in the institution, and unconscious bias is something that a person does. So 100% policing in Canada has a systemic racism problem. And, I think Vicky's being kind of generous, honestly, to say that they haven't internalized it. Well, it's been 20 years since the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. There's really no excuse for continuing to deny it. It's time to deal with it.
Kevin, the reason I say unconscious bias, Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail, and the Globe just interviewed the commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, who I think Lisa Laflamme on CTV National News is going to talk to tonight. But she says, no, we don't have systemic racism, but unconscious bias. These terms are so consequential. What do you make of the debate going on?
Well, I find it troubling that they're having a difficulty admitting that there's systemic racism within their own organization. And the RCMP is hardly the only policing institution, organization, or even institution in Canada that has systemic racism. This is a problem that, as a country, we all need to address. And to get to the root of the problem is to admit you have one. So it's pretty troubling that that's really, they're parsing words over systemic. And then, unconscious bias is a whole nother one. But I think that the issue is that it seems to me that a lot of what we're hearing from the RCMP is that, well, we have a few bad apples. And once we weed them out, everything's fine. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? It's a real superficial view of the depth and the historic context of this problem. I mean, it's very tragic, the recent events that have brought this to the forefront, but right now there's been many opportunities in the past for Canadians as a society to address systemic racism that affects Black communities, affects Indigenous communities, affects visible minorities across this country. And to miss this opportunity now needs leadership. And to not hear that discussion happening within the leadership of the RCMP, I think has to be disappointing.
Right. Vicky, what do you make of these distinctions? Are these distinctions without a difference, as some regard them, or consequential distinctions that are perpetuating the status quo?
Well, these are meaningful because unconscious bias tends to be a thing that you can kind of train and coach people around. So the RCMP and other policing institutions are going to say that simply more training and more assets and resources towards improving their police officers' behaviors is what will improve what they're not going to claim as systemic racism. But systemic racism then requires a wholesale change, and it requires things that people are asking for, including defunding and abolishing the police, taking money away from policing budgets, reconsidering how it is police, especially the RCMP, interact with people in mental health crisis and within Indigenous communities. It requires a change that would require them to concede or give up or have that power taken away. And truly that can't be taken because it's our police services. And so these terms are meaningful because they have consequence for the actions that follow.
Gosh, I wish and we're going to continue this debate, but I know we're short on time. But Vicky, can you just, if you can, I don't know if we can do it, but you said not only defunding, but even abolishing police. So that's still I think that's a term a lot of folks don't understand, Vicky, abolish.
Well, abolishing the police is part of a whole abolition movement that is about changing what our notions of safety and whom safety is for. And so that means removing the presence of police or removing them altogether, as well as removing the jail system, the prison system, and court systems that are punitive towards people rather than creating communities that are ensuring people's safety. There's many, many strategies and ways that this can be done and has been done.